At the end of 2023, Yemen's Ansar Allah group, also known as the Houthis, began targeting ships associated with Israel in the Red Sea and the Bab al-Mandab Strait near Yemen's coast. Over time, these attacks sparked widespread fear among international shipping companies, prompting them to reroute vessels and avoid the area, dealing a significant blow to global trade. In response, the United States sought assistance from a single country, urging it to pressure Iran into restraining the Houthis from continuing their assaults. On April 1, 2024, after Israel targeted the Iranian consulate in Syria, killing 7 key figures from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, including Brigadier General Mohammad Reza Zahedi of the Quds Force, the US once again acted swiftly. It pressured Iran to refrain from retaliating against Israel in response to the strike. These two positions were neither the first nor the last time America specifically asked this country to exercise its influence over Iran and curb its group. This is regardless, of course, of the extent to which this country responded to the Americans' demands to intervene or submitted to Iran itself. Before I tell you why America turns to it, let me first explain that this country, China, is the biggest competitor to the United States. China is the country with the most economic and commercial influence over Iran, simply because it has long represented a lifeline for the Iranian economy. The importance of China as the most critical and strategic economic lifeline for Iran will significantly increase over the next 4 years. The reason is the success of Donald Trump in the American elections and his readiness to enter the White House again in a few weeks. Trump, brothers, intends to turn the lives of Iranians into hell, as we will learn a bit later. This very important episode will explain the secret behind China's economic and commercial influence over Iran, how Iran could literally collapse without China, the volume of trade between them, how China has become Iran's largest oil customer, the story of the Chinese refineries called teapots with Iran, and Trump's plan to crush the Iranian economy. We will also discuss who is set to implement it once he enters the White House next January. Let's dive into this exciting story. In the past, China and Iran were both major powers. As for China, the powerful Qing dynasty ruled from 1644 to 1912, after which the dynasty collapsed due to internal and external factors, such as the Opium Wars, the Taiping Rebellion, and the First Sino-Japanese War. As for Iran, the Qajar Empire ruled from 1789 to 1925 and controlled vast territories, including eastern Georgia, Dagestan, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. After the fall of the Qing dynasty in China and the collapse of the Qajar Empire in Iran, both nations became fragmented and weakened colonial states. Iran was effectively divided into spheres of influence by Russia and Great Britain, while China suffered a series of painful military defeats at the hands of Western powers. Following the establishment of the Chinese Communist regime in 1949, led by the United States and its allies, a variety of international sanctions were imposed on China. This history of external interference explains why both the Chinese and Iranians view the West as an adversary responsible for undermining their countries, draining resources, and attempting to impose control. This shared perspective created a foundation for rapprochement between China and Iran. Over the years, their economic and military relations developed, experiencing periods of close cooperation and other times of distancing due to American pressure, particularly on Iran, to reduce its ties with Communist China. During the Pahlavi era and again in the 1980s, there were shifts in these relations. After violent revolutions toppled pro-American regimes in both countries, anti-Western regimes seized power and rejected Western hegemony. This led to a renewed rapprochement between China and Iran. At the time, China was still an oil-exporting country and saw its relationship with Iran as a way to enhance its influence in a region of significant geopolitical importance, dominated by the United States. For Iran, the partnership with China was also beneficial, as Iran became a key customer for Chinese weapons at a time when China faced stagnation in arms sales. Additionally, Iran's isolation and its war with Iraq prompted it to deepen cooperation with China, especially since China did not have territorial ambitions in Iran, unlike superpowers such as Russia and Britain. China was also willing to provide Iran with technologies that were difficult to source elsewhere. By the early 1990s, China experienced an important economic turning point, marking a shift in Chinese-Iranian economic relations and setting the stage for deeper collaboration. In 1992, the Secretary-General of the Chinese Communist Party, Deng Xiaoping, began focusing on accelerating China's economic growth. As a result, the Chinese economy began to flourish, and by 1993, the country transitioned from being an oil-exporting nation to an oil-importing one. This transformation significantly increased Iran's importance to China. Simultaneously, Iran's growing isolation heightened its reliance on China. At the same time, US-China relations were becoming increasingly tense, escalating to the point of direct confrontation. This tension culminated in a security crisis in the Taiwan Strait in 1996, when China launched ballistic missiles near Taiwan as part of a series of missile tests. The situation nearly escalated into a full-scale conflict between the United States and China. In 2002, a significant and dangerous development occurred that further shaped economic and trade relations between China and Iran: the discovery of Iran's secret uranium enrichment program. This revelation prompted Western companies to withdraw from Iran, while Western governments intensified pressure on the country. The United States, in particular, urged Russia, Japan, South Korea, India, and Europe to reduce their trade and investment with Iran due to concerns about its nuclear ambitions. This situation presented China with an opportunity to deepen its involvement in Iran's economy. As Iran faced a severe shortage of services and an urgent need to develop its infrastructure to exploit energy resources, China stepped in. This coincided with Chinese President Hu Jintao and Prime Minister Wen Jiabao adopting a new economic policy that encouraged Chinese companies to increase their investments in global energy and mining sectors. In 2007, Chinese trade and investment in Iran expanded significantly. For the first time, Iran became a key trading partner for China. This relationship laid the foundation for the current form of economic and trade ties between the two nations. Iran holds vast reserves of oil and natural gas, which help China meet its growing energy needs, supporting its development and fueling economic growth, especially in its competition with the United States. According to OPEC, Iran possesses more than 208 billion barrels of proven crude oil reserves, making it the country with the third largest oil reserves in the world. In early April, the National Iranian Oil Company announced the discovery of shale oil deposits in 10 different locations. Regarding natural gas, Iran holds about 4 trillion cubic meters of proven reserves, ranking second in the world after Russia. This immense wealth in oil and gas drives the Iranian economy, with most of its exports consisting of these resources. In early April, Mohammad Rizvani, the head of Iranian customs, reported that Iran's total exports reached $86.8 billion in the 12 months leading up to March 2024, of which $35.8 billion came from oil exports. This means that oil accounts for approximately 41% of Iran's total exports. Who is purchasing most of this oil? China, the world's largest importer of crude oil. The Iranian regime heavily relies on China as its primary customer. China is the only country capable of buying such large quantities of Iranian oil despite US sanctions. Remarkably, 90% of Iranian oil exports go to China. According to the head of Iranian customs, without China's purchases, Iran would have recorded a trade deficit. In this context, we can observe an important dynamic: the greatest negotiating power rests in the hands of China. For China, Iran is just one of many oil suppliers, and while Chinese purchases account for 90% of Iran's oil exports, they only represent about 11% of China's total oil imports. This gives China the upper hand in negotiations with Iran, which has few alternatives and is heavily reliant on China. Without China's support, Iran's economy could collapse due to the economic suffocation it would face. China is leveraging this strong position to purchase Iranian oil at a discount ranging from $15 to $30 per barrel below the global oil price. It then refines this cheaper oil into high-value, high-quality products. The growth in China's petrochemical industry over the past 2 years has outpaced the growth of all other countries combined in 2019. This remarkable growth enables China to produce huge quantities of petroleum products. In an attempt to increase the price and reduce the discount on Iranian oil, Iran informed Chinese buyers in early January of the previous year that they would narrow the discount on Iranian light crude to only $5 to $6 per barrel, less than Brent crude. However, most of the Chinese refineries, known as teapots, rejected this offer, with only a few agreeing to purchase at the reduced discount, as it would negatively impact their profits. At this point, an important question arises. What are these teapots, and what is their role after the death of US President Trump? Following his withdrawal from the agreement to limit Iran's nuclear program and the reimposition of economic sanctions on Iran, the situation with these refineries has become even more critical. In May 2018, large state-owned oil refineries in China stopped buying Iranian oil due to fears of secondary sanctions imposed by the United States, which warned third parties against importing Iranian oil. These refineries operate outside Chinese territory, making them more vulnerable to future sanctions. At this point, one might ask about the 90% of Iranian oil exports that still go to China. The key lies in the smaller, privately owned refineries known as teapots. These independent refineries, unlike their larger counterparts, are not outside Chinese territory and are less exposed to the American financial system. As a result, they are not as concerned about US sanctions. Teapots, or tea refineries, are primarily located in Shandong province on the Yellow Sea in eastern China. The term teapots comes from the shape of their ancient design. Originally, small tonnage furnaces in Shandong processed oil extracted from local fields, and they helped meet the overflow demands of the larger state-owned refineries. These smaller refineries continue to play a significant role in boosting China's giant oil refining industry. Amid the escalating tensions between Iran and the occupying entity, the US has sought to clamp down on Chinese teapots to reduce their oil purchases from Iran. Last April, the US House of Representatives overwhelmingly approved the energy sanctions law targeting Iran-China oil trade. This law is specifically aimed at Chinese teapots, which purchase Iranian oil and, in doing so, funnel money into the Iranian economy. In supporting the law, US Congressman Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey stated that Iran uses its oil trade with China to bring in $150 million a day in revenue, keeping the Iranian regime alive and providing vital funds to continue its agenda of regional instability. This includes the development of missiles and nuclear weapons. Beyond oil purchases, China has exclusive rights to many Iranian oil and natural gas fields, and is heavily involved in developing the infrastructure of Iran's energy sector. This is due to Iran's lack of the technology and expertise required to fully exploit its vast energy resources. According to the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, many Chinese companies are also involved in engineering projects in sectors such as oil, gas, railways, steel, and infrastructure development. These companies have capitalized on the vacuum left by the departure of Asian and European energy firms from Iran due to US pressures and sanctions. Iran, with its strategic relationship with China, is of significant concern to many, as highlighted by an analysis published by the Israeli newspaper Haaretz on August 13. The article criticized Israeli politicians who were advocating for a preemptive attack on Iran's oil infrastructure, pipelines and ports, labeling such recommendations as short-sighted and reckless. The reason for this is an agreement China signed with Iran in 2016, in which China committed to defending any of its rights or operations in Iran from foreign attacks, treating such actions as attacks on its sovereign territory. The newspaper also referenced a statement by General Chang Zhaozhong of the Chinese People's Liberation Army in 2011, in which he declared that China would not hesitate to protect Iran, even in the event of a global conflict. This statement underscores the strong strategic bond between China and Iran, which has only deepened over the years. In October 2023, Israel conducted airstrikes on Iran but chose not to target oil facilities, focusing on military targets instead. While direct military intervention by China in the region remains unlikely, from China's perspective, supporting Iran economically and developing its military capabilities aligns with strategic goals. China's involvement aims to build a counterbalance to US military presence in the Middle East, an area of growing importance to China. By strengthening Iran, China hopes to create leverage over the US, potentially limiting its military influence in the region, especially if tensions rise over Taiwan. Even without direct military confrontations, Iran's vast network of proxy forces provides China with a valuable asset. Iran's ability to destabilize American allies, including Israel, creates a powerful bargaining chip that China can use to negotiate with the US on broader geopolitical issues. China could potentially use this leverage to gain concessions in the South China Sea or to weaken US military posturing around Taiwan. In March 2024, China demonstrated its growing influence when the Houthi group in Yemen informed China and Russia that their ships could safely pass through the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden without the threat of attack. Unlike Western shipping companies, which redirected their vessels to avoid the region due to the ongoing conflict, Chinese ships continued to pass through the area without issue. This strategic move allowed China to maintain normal shipping routes, while Western companies faced increased shipping durations and costs as they rerouted their vessels around the Cape of Good Hope. Trump's ruling leads us to an important and dangerous question. What exactly does Trump intend to do with Iran? According to people familiar with the team Trump is forming and their plans, they told the Financial Times that Trump and his team intend to implement the maximum pressure strategy, which is the strategy that the Trump administration adopted during its first term. Trump aims to force Iran to abandon its nuclear program and stop funding its regional proxies, such as Hezbollah and the Houthis. He has chosen two individuals who will spearhead the team launching this economic attack on Iran. Michael Waltz, who was recently appointed National Security Advisor, and Marco Rubio, who will be Secretary of State. Both of them are staunchly opposed to both Iran and China. Trump and his team will implement the maximum pressure strategy by tightening sanctions on Tehran, especially on oil exports, as soon as Trump enters the White House next January. The idea is that Iranian oil exports increased from only 400,000 barrels per day in 2020 and tripled during Joe Biden's era, reaching 1.5 million barrels in 2024. Almost all of this oil goes to China. The Trump team will continue drafting executive orders for Trump to sign on his first day in office, targeting Tehran. This will be an extension and intensification of sanctions on Iranian oil exports, aiming to reduce them to a near-zero level. By doing this, they plan to deprive Iran of billions of dollars that China pumps into the Iranian economy, which could ultimately lead to Iran's economic collapse. Iran would be forced to kneel before the United States and agree to negotiate a new nuclear agreement and change its regional policies. This enormous economic pressure that the Trump team is preparing will be painful for Iran, whose economy is already suffering. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, warning about what the Trump team intends to do, wrote that the comparison between the Iranian nuclear program before and after the maximum pressure policy clearly shows an expansion of the nuclear program following Trump's sanctions. Araghchi continued by saying that implementing the maximum pressure strategy would only lead to a maximum defeat, and the best course of action would be to exercise maximum wisdom for everyone's benefit. I have two questions that I hope you can answer in the comments. Do you think Trump will succeed in crushing the Iranian economy and forcing the Iranians to return to the same situation? Can China support Iran in this scenario? I will follow all your answers in the comments. If you like the episode, please like and share the video. The most important thing is to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and tell your friends and loved ones about us. They may benefit.
Thanks for watching, and see you soon for a new topic. Do not forget to hit that subscription button to help us grow. Bye-bye.